the Group 4 expert panel of 10 INSE, and they're very excited, ready to go with their thoughts, ideas, and a few notes. Aditya is going to kick us off with the opening question, please.
So my question to ask for the panel is, to what extent is climate change inevitable?
Okay, starting off, climate change has already been happening in past decades and will continue to happen to some extent. Even with significant efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, this is because some of the emissions that have already been released into the atmosphere, they will continue to cause global warming, as well as for decades and even centuries to come, meaning the word inevitable for it to happen. Additionally, certain feedback mechanisms such as melting of the permafrost and the release of methane from ocean sediments can amplify warming beyond the current projects. However, with the severity of climate change and its impact on human society and the natural world, it can still be mitigated through actions such as reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, adapting to changing conditions, and investing in technologies that can help to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The extent to which these actions are taken and will determine how much warming and associated impacts will occur in the future. Human activity is changing the Earth's climate in ways unprecedented in thousands or hundreds of thousands of years to come as well. With some of the changes now being inevitable and irreversible, climate scientists have been warned, and within the next 2 decades, temperatures are likely to rise by more than 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, reaching the ambition of the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, and bringing widespread devastation and extreme weather for us to suffer with.
I think that for now, much of the current climate change is driven by the human activities, such as burning of the fossil fuels and deforestation, and those activities have led to the significant increase in the concentration of the greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, which heat and contributed to the global warming.
Regardless of the future choice we take, climate change is already occurring and will do so to some level in the future. This is due to the complexity of the Earth's climate system, which includes numerous processes that can take decades or even centuries to complete. Nonetheless, human activities like the combustion of fossil fuels, deforestation, and other changes in land use greatly influence the severity of climate change and its effects on the environment and civilization. As a result of these activities, the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is rising, warming the Earth and trapping more heat. As a result, even though some degree of climate change is unavoidable, its severity and the effects it will have on the environment and civilization are still uncertain. The ability to cut greenhouse gas emissions, save natural ecosystems, and improve infrastructure and community resilience will depend on our collaborative efforts.
A natural occurrence that has led to a decrease in problems leading to climate change, such as the use of cars, which leads to pollution, is pandemics. For example, the COVID-19 pandemic led to primary energy demand being dropped by approximately 4%, and the globally energy-related CO2 emissions fell by 5.8%. This is due to the drop in road transport and aviation activity during the pandemic, and it accounted for over half of the reduction in global emissions. In turn, low carbon fuels and technologies accelerated their expansion, rising from around 27% in 2019 to 29% in 2020. So during the COVID pandemic, the amount of emissions went to a low. However, after the fact, the rate of emissions has risen to an all-time high after the pandemic, which shows that we're still on track to increasing climate change. However, natural occurrences such as pandemics may help soften the blow.
At this point, I also think that climate change is inevitable because of the results that we have today, like pollution and our fossil fuels and CO2 emissions, and that climate change is inevitable because of the natural disasters that we just can't stop. And so we can only like possibly weaken the intensity that global warming could possibly have by trying to reduce our actions with ecological and environmentally friendly actions, and making more laws to try to respect the environment. But at this point there's just no point that we can completely stop climate change from like destroying many more aspects of this world.
The panel's very concerned with climate change. Nikita?
I just want to add to what Joy said in correlation with the human activists taking charge in deforestation. If we're looking at it from an AI perspective, instead of how we're like helping the technology brought in and the progression of technology, we're not paying more attention to climate change, such as like the pollution that we cause and the in taking part of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We're spending more of our time into trying to progress technology and making our lives beneficial, making it easier for us, rather than spending time on the real issue.
And I wonder to what extent the real issue might have been discussed and brought to our attention by Reverend Malthus hundreds of years ago. Is the real issue population? Is the real issue that we're trying to feed too many people, and ecologically the world is starting to give away? The world is starting to change at a rate that the panel here has already alluded to and discussed and cited. Is there, if it is inevitable, which I think was one of the concluding aspects of the conversation with question one that Aditya asked, to what degree is it attributable to 8 billion people on Earth and potentially more in the future?
Well, population is like something that is the base of basically a lot of the other factors that have led to the world seeming to end in a doomsday, because overpopulation leads to more conflicts between people, leading to wars which can destroy societies and populations. And a bigger population means that there's a bigger demand for products, and that leads to pollution and excessive consumption of things like food and, for example, meat, which leads to CO2 emissions. And so a lot of the things that come from having a bigger population can be linked together and show that it ends in climate change.
So you would say it is attributable. You're concerned that we are overpopulated.
Yes, because of the capacity of the Earth that is like around 10 billion, and with around 8 billion population, the threats are getting bigger, and it's linked to the problem of having an overpopulation crisis around the world.
Thank you very much, Jess. Is anyone else Malthusian in their concern, potentially with some ideas outside of that theoretical framework, but have we reached the limit? And what we're starting to see now is the evidence of that.
I feel that with overpopulation, that in correlation to what Jess said, that it is expanding and bigger threats are being added, which is why humans, they need to be more active in order to avoid the catastrophic ecological issues, which is my expertise. The current levels of human activity and consumption are causing significant harm to the environment, including climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, and resource depletion. If we continue on this path, we risk irreversible ecological damage that will have severe consequences for the human societies to come and the planet as a whole. For us to avoid catastrophic ecological issues, we would have to take action on multiple fronts, including reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. We need to drastically reduce the gas emissions in order to mitigate the impacts of climate change, and this requires a shift away from fossil fuels and a transfer to renewable and transition to renewable energy sources. The second way would be to protect our biodiversity, as human needs to protect it by preserving
So there's too many people on Earth potentially, and Nikita said, now here are some potential solutions. Who will act as, I'll ask my question in a second then, Kishan. Why don't you go ahead with the point that you'd like to add, and then I'd like to continue on with a few of the points that Nikita brought to the table.
Yes, to add on to what Nikita said, one of the problems is the irresponsible use of the land that we have. And to help prevent this, it's crucial that we control the clearance and alteration of the land for other uses such as agriculture, mining, and infrastructure. It's also important that we develop and adopt a new technology or production models that are less resource intensive and are less polluting. And this could reduce the risk of biodiversity loss and ecological collapse. Moreover, a shift to a more sustainable lifestyle, more specifically changing our consumption, will accompany this behavior change, such as saving water in our everyday lives and composting.
Perhaps even investing in green infrastructure, as well as we need to invest in renewable energy such as, and use public transportation or walking to our designated places rather than using cars, which would waste more gas, and green spaces to promote our sustainable development.
And we can connect this to past civilizations if you wish, team, because I wonder if the Mayans were having these same discussions with a group of 5 very educated and concerned young people. Who is responsible to oversee the governance and the logistics, the planning of the improvements that Kishan and Nikita are talking about? Whose job is this, and how, if it was to work out in a positive way in the future, how would we look back potentially and say that's how we made it work together amongst the 8 or the 10 billion people that live here?
Well, charities and organizations have like the responsibility to spread awareness about the problems that we have on Earth and about solutions that we can provide, and then the population should try to follow the tips that the organizations and charities and even the government give in their awareness spreading events and information.
Okay, good. Awareness, information, charitable giving, and supporting ideas that concerned citizens share. I like that, Jess.
I feel like we can't depend on people to make change. We are the ones that have to make change, even if it be like small change, such as switching off the lights when leaving a room. We'd have to promote sustainable agriculture as well, to protect the environment and promote food security. As even for our grandchildren, as the last question for the panel, comparing our lives to what they would have in the future, I feel like we're blessed to have such a life where we're able to be free with what we have, as well as the opportunities that were given to us, where I feel like we're taking advantage of it, and we're not going to be able to provide the same for our grandchildren to come.
Okay, and other young activists and people that have gone in front of governments and international panels have shared a similar type of story, maybe even with more alarm than what we're suggesting here, but the irresponsible behaviors of governments and corporations that are not being held in check, and it is leading inevitably to climatic and to civilization collapse. What are, as closing points here for every panel member, if you wish, what are our magic bullets, if you will, or what would be your top recommendations to avoid this inevitable trip down the road of civilization collapse?
renewable energy, I guess, is like a massive factor that can help the planet because like having energy that is clean means that the what you use that energy for is kind of given like free actions, and so it's slowly rising more and more renewable energy. We can like lessen the amount of energy that we do use and start polluting less, and it's a chain reaction to lots of factors that could help reduce.
To help pollute less, it's also important to use public transport, for example, or carpooling, which allows for more people to get what they need done, which is getting from point A to point B with as minimal pollution as possible. One thing that governments could do is work to increase the accessibility for public transportation, which, while perhaps a little bit taxing in the moment, will provide a solid long-term effort to reduce this pollution.
Okay, so I think to reduce the pollution, international cooperation is very important. Like, the first point is like countries can cooperate to address environmental challenges thanks to international accords and institutions like the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and also the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. These accords establish reduction goals for greenhouse gas emissions and give nations ways to track and report on their achievements. Additionally, the development of new technologies and ideas that can aid in reducing environmental contamination, as well as the sharing of knowledge and best practices, can all be facilitated through international cooperation. For instance, international research partnerships can aid in determining the best means of lowering pollution and safeguarding ecosystems. Also, into our daily lives, I think protecting and restoring natural ecosystems, including forests, wetlands, and coral reefs, which store carbon, filter water, and give wildlife habitats. Preserving and rebuilding these habitats can reduce climate change and conserve biodiversity. Also, sustainable lifestyle choices, including lowering meat intake, using public transit or biking instead of driving, and reducing household energy use can also help. The enormity of our ecological problems requires large-scale structural adjustments and government actions.
As Roy said, some new technology or action taken by the government could include the implementation of solar power or carbon capture and storage technologies to run the cities, which this technology already exists, but to expand it further and make it a broader reach would be very beneficial to prevent or slow down climate change.
For us to slow down climate change and do better, we'd have to implement the 3 Rs, which is like reduce and recycle, as well as we'd have to have an increased public awareness. To increase the public awareness of the interconnections between human health and the environment, we'd have to create opportunities for increased public engagement and support for environmental protection and conservation effects. We'd also have to shift our priorities and value towards sustainability and environmental protection. This can lead to increased investment in green technologies and infrastructure, as I said, to implement more agriculture, as well as changes in consumer behavior towards more sustainable choices. And we'd have to reduce our emissions, as I said, as well, as a result of reduced economic activity and travel, and this would help to create opportunities for assessing the environmental impact of different sectors and exploring alternative and more sustainable economic and models. And the second last one would be to global cooperation, to create more opportunities for increased global cooperation and collaboration on environmental issues. This would include sharing information, technology that we know of, and resources to address ecological collapse and prevent future pandemics to come. And lastly, the most important, which would be for influence, would be government action, as even pandemics were able to create opportunities for government action on environmental issues, and governments would be more willing to take bold action on environmental protection and conservation in the wake of a pandemic, and be more responsive to public pressure for sustainable policies, as we wouldn't want more destruction
Thank you very much, panel. It's been a very interesting discussion that has raised a tremendous amount of concern. And obviously there is quite a bit that we believe we know academically. And I think to Roy's point, he made a statement in closing. He said that there needs to be wide scale and dramatic or immediate action on many of these ideas that we have. So hopefully people will make choices to stop taking cars places and to stop eating meat with all of their meals, and individual steps, as well as supporting charities and supporting non-government organizations as well as governments in the initiatives that they are trying to incorporate. If we don't, I'm very, very concerned, like you guys are as well.
Countries can work together to avoid and help address our environmental contamination by mobilizing resources, as we could help to address environmental contamination, and this can include providing financial assistance to developing countries that would need help to support environmental protection efforts, as well as sharing technical expertise and other resources. And we'd also have to encourage accountability for environmental contamination, and this can include holding countries and companies accountable for their environmental impact, and help them in developing mechanisms for monitoring and reporting on contamination.
Thank you, Nikita. We'll leave that as the final word on the day. Well done, panel.